Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Author's Eye with me, your host, Derek Mark Cartwright. This week I'm joined by the science fiction author Sally Ann Melia and the crime fiction writer Richard Fuller. Over to you
Hi.
guys, because this week we're going to be talking about plot points, which is outside of my wheelhouse as someone who just makes it up as I go along. Richard, perhaps you can tell us and give us a definition of what you mean by plot
Yeah,
points.
sure. I mean, any story has plot points in it. Plot points are there to um, move the story on, create tension, whatever. So, a sort of broad definition of a plot point is a significant event or development in a story that advances the plot and changes the direction of the narrative. These points are typically major events that have a significant impact on the story and its characters, and they often serve as key turning points in the plot. Now, the actual number of plot points in a story can vary on the length and complexity of the narrative, but most stories have at least a few key plot points that drive the action forward and keep the audience engaged. And in doing so, then we find that stories fall into certain you may have heard of three-act structure, five-act structure, seven-act structure, and these are all revolve around the plot points. And I know Sally wants to jump in and talk a little bit more about those sort of three, five, seven-act structures and what they mean to a story. So I'll pass it over to you, Sally.
Right. So basically, stuff happens. I have to say, I do sometimes read books where stuff doesn't happen. There's been a very good book this year, which is called Orbital, which is about some astronauts who are on the International Space Station. And there's a story, is basically 5 days on the International Space Station, and it's lived through their lives, and actually nothing happens. Except for they live their lives on the International Space Station,
The
and we live
daily
in
grind of being on a space station. Yeah.
yeah the thoughts they have, the activities they have, the loneliness and yet the camaraderie of it. So, but that's very unusual. Normally, stuff happens, and as a 3-act play or a 5-act play, stories
Hmm?
such like Dune, for instance. I was watching Dune, the film. The first act is very much setting the scene. So we establish all the different planets and all the different characters and all the different political relationships. And then at the end of the first act, there's the betrayal when the Emperor sends in the Harkonnen to attack the Arrakis, or the planet Dune. And then we go into the second act, which is the Great Escape. So that's when the main protagonists try to escape from this treachery. And the third act is the aftermath of whether or not they actually manage to escape or who dies helping them escape. And then finally they have to start again. And actually the third act is normally, as it was very much in Dune, jumping off point for the next novel, which is going to be obviously about revenge. So that's where a very classical three act play. Um, and it's useful to keep it in mind, particularly when you're writing and you get stuck. You if you can think about it as an arc that goes up and down and up and down, and with interest and chapters and acts, it often helps you to continue with the story. Because you may think, okay, what am I actually writing at the moment? Oh, well, I'm setting the scene. Or what am I writing at the moment? I'm writing the action sequences. What am I writing at the moment? I have got to get through the middle of the book can often be the most tricky because you can be stuck trying to, you've got out of one problem and you're heading towards the other. And there's a phenomenon called the soggy middle. It's really important in the middle of the book to find an idea, whether a sense of urgency, a subplot that takes you through the middle of the book onto the next section. And so, for instance, in Dune, which I was explaining, the sense of urgency in the second act is, will the main characters, Paul Atreides and his mother, will they escape? And that drives us all the way through even though they're not at the center of the action, which is the great battle that's going on behind them. The narrative is driven forward by the thought about will they escape, and then once they've escaped, once we've realized they have escaped, like, will they fit in with their new surroundings, and what will they make of it?
So sorry, this is a soggy bottoms, soggy middle,
Soggy middle, I think. Yes.
soggy middle.
Yeah.
What you don't want one of those, do you? Really?
No, definitely
In
don't want those.
any
No,
situation.
Certainly don't want a soggy bottom.
No,
They
no,
want to
no.
stick to soggy middles. That they don't
yeah,
want those either. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I've got an example here. Slightly more classical example is Romeo and Juliet, and that's really a sort of it's a 3-act structure, but it's got 5 sort of plot points in it, really. And the first plot point is often referred to as the inciting incident. It's what triggers the call to arms for the hero, what's going to get them involved in the story. And the inciting incident in Romeo and Juliet is all very well. The separate worlds of the Montagues and the Capulets are trundling along quite happily until Romeo meets Juliet and falls in love, and he's smitten with her, and that's therefore the inciting incident in Romeo and Juliet. Now, plot point 1 comes midway through the sort of first act, if you like, and this is where Romeo, he's just married Juliet, and the Romeo and Juliet discover the identity of each other and realize they're opposing enemies, and they have fallen in love with someone who's a sworn enemy, which is not good news, is it? So this means they've either got to give up their love or somehow get over this undying enmity that they have. And then in a lot of stories, we always come to the midpoint. Now, the midpoint is an interesting thing. So, the midpoint is often a turning point. I mean, in a sort of most cases, it's often where the first half of the book, story, film, the hero is being pushed around by the bad guys. He's struggling to just stay alive. He's being kicked from pillar to post, metaphorically, if it's not a thriller. But when he gets to the midpoint, he suddenly decides, "Sod this! I've had enough of this. I'm going to fight back." And it's at the midpoint is a big turning point when the hero will then start to make things happen for him instead of being pushed around. He wants to make things happen. And in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo, who's now just married Juliet, kills her cousin Tybalt in a duel, and he's banished from Verona. So the young couple have now got this problem. How are they going to get back together? And they start to make plans to do this. And this is the midpoint. This is them fighting back against the two families. So then we get into the second half of the story, and midway through that, you get the second plot point, which is Juliet, married to Romeo now, is being forced to marry Paris by her unknown parents. So, well, not her parents aren't unknown to her, but her parents don't know she's married to Romeo. And Friar Lawrence comes up with a plan to allow Juliet to escape with Romeo, but it involves faking her death. So this is getting quite heavy now. And then, of course, you get the climax where Romeo discovers Juliet in the tomb, thinks she's dead. He takes the poison, and we all know what happens. And they don't live happily ever after.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Sorry, but those are the sort of key plot points in Romeo and Juliet. And so we've got the inciting incident kicks it off. Something happens in the midway through which makes it worse. Then you get the midpoint where the hero resolves he's trying to fight back. Something else happens even worse in the middle of the next second half of the book, and then finally they reach the climax, and they're the key plot points. And if you start to be aware of them and watch films, read books, you start to see them coming through. Inevitably, in an hour-long drama program, you'll find that the midpoint is exactly in the middle when the advert break happens, and you'll find them characters fighting back. It's well worth watching out for them. So I think that's sort of Romeo and Juliet. Sally, you got any? Did you want to talk about Star Wars or
no.
no?
I could still about Star Wars, but the film I've been watching this week has been the K-pop Demon Hunters.
All
which
right.
is top of the charts on Netflix at the moment and is going great guns. And what it is, it's a mashup really of Korean culture, and it brings together K-pop singers and some mythology around demon hunters. So in a Korean culture, they have that demons come into the world of living to steal the souls, and people just disappear when their souls are sealed. So to protect the living, there is three singers who sing a beautiful sound, and this sound but protects the land and keeps the demons at bay. So of course, in the episode in this film, it makes perfect sense for the three singers to be pop stars, because to keep the demons at bay, you need to hear their songs quite a lot. So by having them a pop band that were very, very successful, the demons are clearly losing, because this beautiful pops trio are just so successful. The demons can't get looking, except they have this cunning plan, and they decided to fight back with a K-pop band of demons. So five very good-looking K-pop boy band comes back to fight, and it then becomes an interesting fight between the female K-pop stars and the male K-pop stars. And while the female K-pop stars are just fighting to be top of the charts and presumably to make a lot of money, or to keep their fans happy, they mostly just talk about their fans. They don't talk about the money. The male K-pop demons actually want to steal everyone's soul. So, and what the K-pop demons do is they undermine the credibility of the girl band through various nefarious actions, and it looks like they're about to win. And then you have the big plot twist is that one of the girls is not everything she seems, and they're releasing this a record called Golden. And in the lyrics of Golden, there's so I will be true to myself. I will be myself. I will not hide myself anymore. And she wrote this song thinking, I have to tell everyone I'm half demon. And then and so she just goes out on stage, and when she takes off her jacket, she has like marks on her arms, which are sort of birthmarks, which mark her out as a demon. And she's immediately rejected by everybody. And so her friends just see, you're a demon. And so that breaks the group apart. So in her moment of honesty, trying to be true to herself, she destroys the entire group. And at that point, the demons have won. And they do then start stealing loads of souls. And it's up to the three girls to re-find their friendship, to rekindle their love of each other, and finally come back together singing, and the world is saved. So yes, it's a really interesting plot, which I really enjoyed, because it absolutely gripped all the way through.
I'm going to have to sue them. I'm going to have to sue them, because my comic fantasy called The Keyholder's Apprentice is a very similar thing to that, but it's I'm using 70s and 80s pop music as part of that culture, but it's the rock stars are the people who go stealing the souls of the living and all that. Anyway, that's an aside. Sorry about that.
I'm just thinking it makes the Eurovision Song Contest look a bit tame, doesn't it,
Oh
really?
God, yeah.
Yeah, very tame. I mean, like they don't fight demons on stage at the Eurovision Song Contest,
No,
which they do in this film.
No,
and if we
I've
had
made
to
it
put
my
up
mission. I've made it my mission not to fight demons on stages.
I thought if we have to put up a British K-pop equivalent of a K-pop band, like our Eurovision entry, then we're not going to do very well, are we?
Mille points.
Yeah.
Mille points. Yeah.
So there we go. Yes.
Right. So I have just take a few minutes. I just following on from this particular topic. So as a newbie writer myself, I was interested when we first started to proposing this as a topic for discussion, because I am a pantser. I am 95% of a pants. I literally make things up as I start the story, and I just get involved and I write, and basically I write it down and then I edit it and all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting exercise for me as someone who's read lots of different books and all the rest of it to actually then try and analyze. So I thought I'd use something a bit contemporary, like Sally's done with the K-pop stuff, which is to look at the Thursday Murder Club, because this is a series of books that I've read. And then I watched the film on over the weekend, and I just thought it was interesting to break it down because along those sort of lines of what Richard Osman had done in relation to the book, and then I think it's Steven Spielberg is the one who's then made the movie. But you mentioned about Richard about the three act sort of
Mm.
story, and this is a classic in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I've broken it down just into you've got the setup, which is the whole idea of the Thursday Murder Club is, for those people who don't know, is there's a group of retired people in a village, their own retirement village, and every Thursday afternoon they meet together and they look at old cold case files or any kind of crime to try and effectively work it out and solve it.
It
Um,
beats doing crosswords
it beats
and
doing
Sudoku
crosswords.
puzzles, doesn't it? Yes.
Absolutely right. So,
Mm.
so you've got the four people, and so you've got the setup. You're introduced to them. They all sort of fit together. They've got different skill sets, but it's led primarily by Elizabeth, who, without wishing to give too much away, we find much later on in the film is in the book is that she's ex MI6, so she's an old spy and has done lots of different things. Anyway, uh, that's the setup. So the setup is the club, and then they are investigating a historic murder, and then lo and behold, a real murder happens. So whilst at the village, somebody dies, and they have witnessed an argument before this, etc., etc. So you've got that first part. So the first part, the first plot point is the setup, and then the murder.
Yeah, that murder is the inciting incident, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you've got what is effectively the soggy middle bit, which you might want to call it, which is the investigation. So this is where they then try and unravel and start trying to put pieces together, and then you get the introduction of maybe a subplot, or you'll get a misdirection. So much so that you're led to believe the prime candidate for the murder is this person, the developer. Oh, hang on a minute. All of a sudden, the developer ends up dead. So straight away,
Mm.
you've got to change your
Yeah.
direction
Mm.
of attack,
Mm.
as it were.
Yeah, that's another key plot point, isn't it? When
Yeah,
they find the second body.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then the third part is effectively the resolution, which is,
Mm.
um, pulling all of those effectively loose strings, as it were, together so that we work out, or we are shown who has done what. And it's interesting to me. I don't want to give away too much in relation to spoilers and all the rest of it, but the ending in the book is different to the ending in the film, subtly. And there's a subtle difference, but the main person who uh, is the main killer um, is the same in both the book and the film.
So
But I
the
just thought it was
antagonist,
interesting.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
just for me, as I say, as a newbie writer, I just thought it was an interesting exercise to take it away instead of just read. Because when I read, I tend to, when I get into a story, I'm not considering the plot point. I'm not considering about anything else. I'm just going with the flow. So it
Mm.
was an interesting exercise, and I
I
just thought
think
that might be
it is
interesting.
what's interesting is how you get to a plot. And I'm very much not a plotter, and I tend to write a fair amount and then sort of sit back and look at it. And at that round point, I try to write a synopsis based on what I have. And then suddenly you can see the plot holes, you can see what's missing. And if you've got an idea about where you're going, you can see what you need to write next. And that's a very helpful way. So you don't have to have a plan from the beginning, but you can write a fair amount, and then sit back and analyze it and figure out what the plan should be. I have also had the technique, which I found worked quite well on one of my most recent novels, was you've got the idea, you sit and you write it down. You write down the entire story outline, which might take you 3 or 4 pages, just in really rough notes. And then you put it in a drawer, and then you go away and write the novel. And if at any point you get stuck, you go and pull your notes out the drawer and have a quick look. And that will normally help you if you've got a bit stuck. And I had an example of this in my most recent novel where I was writing Heirs of Empire. And I wrote the opening sequence shows Marlene, one of our main characters, being kidnapped. And the first time I wrote it, I had her kidnapped, rescued, and back drinking tea at the end of the third chapter. And when I read it back, I thought like, oh, that's really disappointing. I was really enjoying that. And I thought like, no, she can't be rescued. Not that quickly anyway. So I went back and I wrote 33% of the book after the rest of the book had been finished. So I'd finished the entire book, looked at it, thought like, actually, that was a really good plot line that I just throw away by letting her get rescued far too quickly. I went around and wrote another 30% of the book, writing her an entire story arc. And that's how you can sometimes you see a better story than you had planned for at the beginning.
I think, I mean, I tend to be a plotter because I'm writing crime thrillers, and you need to know where you're going with them. But even then, you start finding as you get into the meat of the book, third of the way through, whatever, that your characters are starting to push it off into different directions, and so you still have an overview of where it wants to go, but you keep having to sort of you can't have. I will try and write out the plot outline for the whole novel before I start as a series of, so we say 2 or 3 sentences relating to each scene or each chapter. So I might have 50, 60 of these scenes. But I find as I go on that they start changing, and the initial ones probably follow fairly promptly, fairly accurately what I set out to do. But by the time I get through to the middle of the book, they're starting to change, and I'm going back and tweaking the chapters and scenes, and so they follow on slightly differently. I always thought that the best description I ever heard of plotting was Mark Billingham, who's a well-known crime writer, and he's written TV series for BBC and so on. He said it's like a journey at night. He knows where he wants to go, but he can only see as far as the car headlights reach at any one time. And I thought that was a very good analogy.
Yeah.
You can see so far, but not totally there, because you don't quite know what's going to happen, and your characters might take off. And you might find something, you might have a good idea. Well, that would be even better. I could put my protagonist under even more pressure if I did this than I assumed when I was plotting it. So, yeah, there's different ways of doing it, but at least if you're aware of the plot points and those key moments in the story, and if you can have those in your head when you start writing, I'm sure that it will help you with your writing.
Yep.
Maybe not literary fiction, but
yeah.
I think that's the key takeaway, isn't it?
Literary fiction, do we? Right. I think with science fiction and with fantasy and comedy and with thrillers, having a plot is really, really, really important because you're about telling a story.
I think we're really talking genre fiction, aren't we? If at this point, for plotting and having plot points and so on, more so than literary fiction might do, which
yeah. No, we haven't got one of our literary fiction with us tonight, so we can't really talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
so there, I think that sort of sums up plot points, doesn't it?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll leave it there, and we'll come back next week again. So it's a good night from me.
Good night from me.
Good night from them.